to get started. I want to welcome everybody to Augusta as we get this meeting started of the study committee on the House and the Senate side. I'm honored to serve with Chairman Powell here in the House, along with Butler, Kirkpatrick, and Huffstetler. I'm going to ask Chairman Huffstetler to open us.
Let's pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given us and all that you blessed us with. We know that you've been good to us in so many ways, and we ask that you could continue to give us your goodness and mercy and protect us. And we particularly ask in this meeting that you would give us your wisdom, and it could be yours that we would use in the decisions we make, and that all we do here would honor you today. And we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, sir. Grateful each of you are here and here to present to help educate the committee. It is a study committee, so we do look forward, even though I chair the House Study Committee and Senator Huffstetler chairs the Senate. We did agree to meet jointly so that we could be respectful of your time and your expertise and have just a single presentation for both of us. We will be submitting different reports at the end, but obviously it takes the House, the Senate, and the governor to agree on something that's changed. Certainly healthcare is at the top of the mind of a lot of Georgians, people across the area. I'm welcoming everyone to my current hometown. Grew up in Macon, spent some time in Athens, and have worked from Chatsworth down to Brunswick during some in emergency departments. But I'm excited about Augusta and excited that you guys have come, some of you from a long way, and I appreciate it. 1828 was the start of the Medical College of Georgia, which is the flagship medical school of the University System of Georgia. Multiple campuses. The partner campus in Athens is big. There's a campus in Rome, Albany, and somebody may correct me here in a minute, but Rome, Albany, there's a Savannah-Brunswick alliance. We start, obviously, like I mentioned, Athens and Augusta. We're just looking at different things to where Georgia is the reach of this only public medical school in Georgia. When I say medical school, I include all of Augusta University, which does have the tremendous health sciences campus, and we're going to hear just briefly about that in a moment, about the health sciences campus. We'll be hearing from some of the leaders of the different schools for PAs, for nurse practitioners, for physicians. So we're looking forward to that, to learn the expertise that's generated. That's a blessing to the entire 159 counties of this state, with graduates in nearly all of them. Providing care, and so we really appreciate the ones who drove a ways to come to Augusta. We hope you'll learn something about this home of medical education in Georgia, and at the same time we hope to learn a lot about the training and the expertise and the way the entire healthcare team works together. So I'm going to, at this point, turn it over to Brooks Keel, Dr. Keel, the president of Augusta University, leads the Medical College of Georgia, all the different campuses. I'll let him go over and correct me on all the different campuses and expound on that. Thank you, Dr. Keel, for being here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Huffstetler. Thank you all, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you first let me thank you for serving this great state. We sometimes think the only time that you do that is from January to April, but we know that's a full-time job all throughout the year, as evidenced by you being here. We're just delighted to have you here. Spend a little bit of time on an incredibly important issue. My job is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. I try to keep my points brief, but it really is just to welcome you to your university. This is the state's only public academic medical center. We are the state's only public medical school. Medical College of Georgia, as been pointed out, it's been around since 1828. It's 13th oldest and the 8th largest medical school in the country. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. In addition to the Medical College of Georgia, we're also the home of the state's only dental college, the Dental College of Georgia, with the state's flagship nursing program. We have wide and varied programs in allied health sciences. And all of those programs, I think, fit very nicely into what you're going to be deliberating today and learning about today. Has to do with physician oversight of mid-level practitioners. As the state's only public medical school, we have a far reach, as already been pointed out, and Mr. Chairman, you're dead on. You hit it right out of the park. We do have branch campuses in Savannah, Brunswick, Albany, and Rome, and a four-year partnership campus in Athens. We have over 2,000 volunteer faculty across the entire state of Georgia that are training our medical students, primarily at the junior and senior level. We also have a campus of our nursing program in Athens. Very large campus there as well. So the entire state of Georgia really is our campus. To me, I think if you leave with one welcome take-home message, that is the fact that we are your medical school. Regardless of what part of the state you're in, we have an impact, and it's an impact that we take very seriously. One thing I will mention very briefly, as the state medical school, we take our responsibilities very seriously. And one of those responsibilities is to help one of the biggest issues we feel in the state of Georgia, and that is healthcare in the rural part of the state. We're currently ranked 39th in the country in terms of the number of practicing physicians per capita. That's not a place we want to be. We know that, and if you get, especially in the southwestern part of the state, we're almost a third world country in terms of health disparities and health outcomes. And we as the state's medical school have got to do a better job in providing an opportunity for physicians and for advanced practice providers to practice in those parts of the state. We provide health care to all citizens of Georgia. We have a program you'll be hearing more about. I'm sure Dean Hess will have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about our 3+3+6 program that is aimed at providing an opportunity for medical students to practice in the rural part of the state. And whatever type of situation which we find our young physicians in terms of setting up practices, it is going to be a team sport. And they're going to be relying on team members associated with their practice to provide that health care. So the topic that you're talking about today is hugely important, not only for the students who we graduate and how they'll interact together, but for the health care of the entire state of Georgia. So I want to personally thank you for what you do on this committee, but I also want to thank you for being here in Augusta. It's a real pleasure to have you here. So Mr. Chairman, with that, I'm going to, in my comment, I'm happy to answer the questions, but you're going to be having the experts up here to really give the information you need. I'm just here to be a good cheerleader, but thank you so much for being here. Any specific questions for me? Very well, then I'm going to turn things over back to you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you all so much for being here.
Dr. Charles Howell with the Children's Center. They're our host today. I'm going to let him, he's led this and helped so many children across Georgia that I'm going to let him talk about the team here that he helps lead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Newton. I appreciate that. And I welcome all of you to Augusta. I'm asked to do an infomercial, and the infomercial is about the Children's Hospital. I'm sure all of you on the legislature know that back in the mid-1990s, we met with Senator Tom Murphy, the Majority Leader, excuse me, not Senator, the Majority Leader Murphy, and with Governor Miller, and got the appropriation for the Children's Hospital. We're now 20 years old. We just celebrated our 20th year birthday this past year. And so I want to give you just a little bit of flavor of what we do here. This is the front of the Children's Hospital. You can see that we've added the A. Thanks to Dr. Keel, we've got Augusta University back as our name instead of Georgia Regents. And you might wonder about what do we do? Well, we provide expert medical care for Georgia's children. We provide expert surgical care for Georgia's children. We train pediatricians. That's a big one. We train family medicine doctors. We train surgeons. We're the 8th, maybe the 9th largest medical school in the United States. And we are underfunded. We have an unfunded mandate to educate our next generation of healthcare providers. And when I say unfunded mandate, it's not totally unfunded. You guys are great. But as I go through this, you'll see that there are dollars that can be spent further. You've met our president. We have a new CEO, Ms. Kiefer, who came to us from Alabama, and we're very proud to have her. She is a ball of fire. I grew up on a tobacco farm, so I didn't grow up in medicine. My daddy was a farmer in South Georgia, and so I have clinics now in South Georgia. I have a clinic in Albany, I have a clinic in Valdosta, where I see kids that might need surgery. Our Children's Hospital is not in competition with local pediatricians, so we're not in competition with them. We're here to partner with them and take care of the more complex types of surgery that they might need. We have hospitalists that stay in this hospital 24/7. We have residents that are here 24/7, 365. We're a resource for them and for their child and for the pediatrician. And we have at least 14 satellite pediatric clinics across the state. We have every surgical specialty that you could want for children. Now these specialists, they're already trained in orthopedics, and now they go do a fellowship in pediatric orthopedics. So they're already trained in ophthalmology, and they go do a fellowship in pediatric ophthalmology. And we have every pediatric medical subspecialty that your child could possibly want. We're around the clock ER. We have 154 bed capacity for kids. We have a very sophisticated pediatric ICU, a level 4 NICU, and you might say, well, what's a level 4 NICU? Well, that means we can operate on babies as small as 400 grams, less than a pound, up to 300 kilos, or 300 pounds. We do neonatal and pediatric air and ground transport from infants all over the state. Now, what did we do last year? Well, last year we saw 4,735 kids who needed outpatient surgery. We saw over 100,000 visits, and we did over 900 cases of kids who needed to be hospitalized after surgery. We see kids that are born with their intestine outside of their body. This particular mama was from Albany. She was pregnant. We knew she was going to have this baby, so we brought her up here a little bit early. She stayed at the Ronald McDonald House right across the street. She delivered here, and you can see her baby's intestine is outside of the body. I can remember when I first went into pediatric surgery, the mortality for this problem was about 50%. Now, if they don't survive, we're in trouble. And here's what we did with it. You wouldn't fit back on the inside, so we had to stage it. We had to put it in a little silastic bag. And so we put it in this bag immediately after birth. And then over a few days, we kind of squeeze it down. The abdomen slowly gets a little bit bigger, and then it finally goes back in, and then everybody's happy. You say, well, that's pretty dramatic. Is that all y'all do here? No, that's not quite all we do here. This particular baby, we knew was going to have trouble at birth. He's got a huge mass in his floor of his mouth and his neck. We knew that as soon as he was born, he was going to probably die if he was not intubated, a tube in his airway. Well, we looked at his CT scan, and you can see there's supposed to be a dark shadow coming right here, a black line. That's the trachea. You don't see that. So we knew when this baby was born, we better do something. Well, thank goodness we left the baby attached to the umbilical cord and attached to the mama, just delivered the head through a C-section incision, intubated the baby. It took about 20 minutes to get a tube in. Then we completed the C-section. And here you can see our pediatric ENT is struggling to get this tube in this baby's airway. Here's mama right here. The baby's head's hanging out right here out of the uterus. And here she is a couple of weeks later. Now, this baby had to be delivered in the Children's Hospital operating room. So mama and baby are in the Children's Hospital operating room. Pretty nice. Now, we have the advantage of a lot of places in that our citizens across the state provide patients for us to take care of. These patients travel long distances to get here. They don't have a place to stay when they get here. So our Ronald McDonald House is right across the street. So mom can deliver here, we can operate on the baby, and then she can stay at Ronald McDonald House until it's time to go home, which is a big asset for us. You can see Ronald McDonald House stays busy. We've treated 3,000 families since 2015, over 24,000 nights. And Cockwood EMC, down in Moultrie, Georgia, provided the largest number of families that we see. That single EMC. Where should kids be treated? Well, you know, kids are treated all over the state of Georgia. There's a lot of urgent cares and emergency rooms and hospitals. But if your kid is sick, he should be in a children's hospital where they have neonatal and pediatric ICUs. We have dedicated operating rooms for children. The worst thing that can happen to a surgeon during an operation is the nurse to tell him, we don't have that size. That usually means somebody's going to be in trouble. But we have every size and piece of equipment to take care of a 400-grammer up to a child that might weigh 300 pounds. We have specialized surgeons, we have specialized anesthesiologists and pediatricians. And this gives you an idea of where our clinics are. You can see across the state. I go down to Albany and Thomasville and Valdosta. We have people who go to Waycross and Savannah. We have clinics in Athens, Lake Oconee. You can see we're busy. Last year we saw a child from every county in the state of Georgia, which I think is pretty impressive. And if you look at this map here, you can see where our kids come from that we take care of. The darker colors red is where we get the majority of our patients. Half of them, over half of them, live south of Macon. So they travel a long distance. So having a Ronald McDonald House is really important. You say, well, we as the state legislature built this hospital. We built it 20 years ago. Well, it's now probably time for an upgrade. And if you ask us what our priorities are, it's probably this. We need to expand our neonatal ICU. We need to expand our PICU, our pediatric ICU. We need to expand the cardiac intensive care unit part. And we need to move into bone marrow transplant. So these are the things that we're working on going forward. So So what can you do to help? Well, I hope you've learned a little bit more about what we do here. You can share this knowledge with anyone that you like. You're welcome to come back and take a tour of the Children's Hospital. We'll take you into the operating rooms. We'll show you the advanced laparoscopy equipment that we have for children. We'll take you through the DNL ICU. It'll open your eyes, I can assure you. And when I talk to other groups around the state, Kiwanis, Rotary, electric membership corporations, I ask them to make this a charity of their choice for their business. Sometimes they do. I spoke to an EMC group the other day that gave $50,000 to us for the Children's Hospital. And I mean, to me, that's fantastic. This guy right here has been very helpful to us. I'm sure all of you know him, John Burns. His wife serves on our Children's Advisory Board, and she brings a breath of fresh air to our advisory board meeting. We're actually meeting tonight. So thank you all for your attention. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Dr. Howell, and on behalf of all the citizens we represent from all those counties in red and all the others that you're a resource, please pass along to your team that the state appreciates the work they do and the willingness to do it in incredibly challenging circumstances. Thank you for helping put this together, a team that can do that kind of amazing work. Thank you, some of our most valuable citizens. And now I have honor to introduce some of the presenters that are going to be telling us about the education, their students that I'm sure all of us are real proud of, but and also their degrees and their degree requirements. I'm going to start with Nurse Practitioner Education presentation, Dr. Lucy Marion. Looking forward to have you as the Dean and the Professor at the Augusta University's College of Nursing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the honor and privilege to be here, Representative and Mr. Chairman Newton and Senator and Chair Huffstetler and the esteemed committee and all the audience here who's interested in this topic. We really appreciate your being here, and particularly here at Augusta University. So I am going to be talking about the topic evaluating and simplifying physician oversight of PAs and APRNs. We're mostly going to be talking about nurse practitioners. There are several different kinds of APRNs, but we understand that was our request, was to really delve into the nurse practitioner education. We're happy to do that. And my colleague, Dwayne Hooks, is going to be covering the details about education for you. I'm going to talk more generally about the issues surrounding the education and how education, I think that you'll see when the education that we provide students will help you understand why we make these requests to liberalize the controls over the practice of APRNs. So a little bit about myself. I also am from South Georgia. I was raised in Scotland, Georgia. How many people know Scotland, Georgia? Usually nobody. But it's in Pie-Shaped County, Telfair County, south of Macon, and it's the big city of McRae was our seat. So I see a little bit of awareness now. So that's where I spent my most of my childhood years, and then went on to become a nurse practitioner. So I'm a family nurse practitioner by background, about 35 years experience, mostly in the shelters. I really enjoyed working with the most vulnerable and worked in a variety of shelters. And I also have a long history of working with standards and scope of practice for nurse practitioners, but for nursing in general. I actually co-authored the very first standards and scope statement for nurse practitioners in the nation for the American Nursing Association. And I've served on many standards and scope bodies since then. And my next task after I retire in December is to be the co-chair of the new National Task Force, which you'll hear more about. It'll be about a year and a half to 2 years work to upgrade and revise those standards of educational standards for nurse practitioners. So a little bit about our college. I don't have time to give you an infomercial. I would love to. This is our timeline. We started 76 years ago at the University of Georgia. That was our home. That's where we were started. We were a war baby. Our school was. Many schools were. They needed baccalaureate education on into the current status. So that timeline is there. It gives you all 7 names that we've had. Try managing your business cards with 4 names in 5 years for our university, but that's what we did. We were the only ones that actually merged programs in the consolidation, and so on. So we like to tell that story about our great College of Nursing. It's the flagship. It's always been out there, on the cutting edge, starting the first program with whatever, and that shows when those different programs came in. Secondly, is it's a very large poster there. It's one that we recently gave for the Board of Regents, and it just has facts, and I won't go into it today much as I'd like to talk about our school. We are expecting a new dean, January 1st. She's Dr. Tanya Sudia from Baylor, but she was at Emory and Mercer, so she knows our state wants to come back home. But we're looking forward to having her. So these are the programs we have at our College of Nursing, and I won't spend a lot of time, but in our Bachelor of Science program, we're really rocking and rolling there. We have an accelerated program that they can do in 3 years. We've had that a couple of years, and we have partners from this hospital here, our medical center, helping us do that. They start in May, and they finish the next August. They start right out of the sophomore year. So they save themselves almost an entire year so they can go to work. It will be less costly for them, and we expect that to grow beyond our wildest dreams. But so far, we've just tried it in the pilot state. We're one more pilot year, but it's been very successful. And then our Master of Science program, we have only one left, and that is our clinical nurse leader. Most of those students come from other degrees, and it also is accelerated. It's immersion learning, and we're ranked 4th in the nation for that program. But we're going to be talking today about our Doctor of Nursing Practice and our APRN specialty, so I won't go into this, and Glenn is going to pick up there. We do have a Doctor of Philosophy program. It's growing a lot, and we are seeing these new DNPs come into the PhD program, so we're trying to streamline that. So the realities of, we're all based it, I don't have to spend a lot of time here. You know that we don't have enough nurses. We've got 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every single day until 2030. The nurses are retiring in droves. Our healthcare is very complex. Nurses are better and better educated, so they're asked to do more, to do different things, create new roles, more positions. We have a geographic maldistribution, not only state to state and region of this state, but also within the state. And we all know the Two Georgias story, so I won't go there, but certainly the rural is a great interest of ours. Here at our place, we have several HRSA grants to help us do more and more training in the rural area. And some of those people who are working in those are in the room. And we do not have good workforce data in the state or in the nation, really, for the nursing workforce. We did have a major study almost 10 years ago, a little bit like Flexner for you physicians in the group. That this was evidence-based. It was not done by nurses. It was done by, at that time, the IOM, which is now the National Academy of Medicine. And I'll just show you the first recommendation was to remove scope of practice barriers in your states. And we've been following that. And we looked at the governor's study by Deloitte, and I'm sure you've probably all looked at that, and it's very, very well done study in my view. I would have liked to have asked more questions, but we're really, really happy to see that. And healthcare access, as we know, is a problem. We know that we don't rank where we want to rank in our health rankings, and that with our more vulnerable populations, we reach the national median score only 20% of the adult and 30% of child Medicaid quality. Core measure, so this is 2015, so of course that drives us as a profession in nursing and all of us in health to do a better job for our state. And we'll talk a little bit about the APRN workforce. First of all, I want to thank the legislators in the room for all that you have done, and I just listed a couple of them here. We have had STEPS funding that helped us fund our faculties' education so they can have a terminal degree. Sometimes it's master's degree, sometimes it was doctoral degree. The loan repayment for APRNs is in place. We're in our 3rd or 4th year. I was very happy to work with Chairman Butch Parrish on that, and then later with Senator Unterman. And we have great need for that, for that loan repayment. So we appreciate that. And then the tuition assistance program, we have different from everybody else, our part-time faculty. I think maybe one other group has that too. We appreciate that. And then we have this, we've been included in the Georgia Board for a healthcare workforce instead of physician workforce. We're excited about that. And then the PTEP got passed. So we are making progress, and we thank you for each and every one of those. Now, we do have challenges. We struggle with our faculty, though we're not anywhere near competitive with our salaries with the working nurse practitioner. The average, the reported salary in Georgia for nurse practitioners is $106,500. We pay faculty for the range in that with that kind of education about 80. So it just gives you an idea of you can imagine how difficult it is to keep faculty with those spreads. We do have some practice opportunities for them to make up for part of it, but I just want you to know that spread. We have very strict ratios for NP student, NP faculty. I think they're more strict than they need to be, but that's what they are. We've lived with them for at least 20 years, I think that needs to be more evidence-based. It's not, right now it's an opinion, so we'll be working on that as I move into my chair position, co-chair position. So the availability, people are retiring right and left. A lot of those baby boomer NPs, they work till they're in their 70s, I'll tell you. The nurses are hanging in there, but it gets to be time. So there's a lot of possibilities here. I won't go into those, but we are always looking for solutions for these issues. So folks, you might want to know about how many nurses we have, all kinds of nurses, including that advanced practice. We have about 130 as of July 3rd. And of the advanced practice, of that 129, 15,000 are advanced practice. We don't know how many are actually practicing in the state, but when we look at the nurse practitioner data, when we look at the Department of Labor, and we look at all the different, the American Community Survey and such, we think that we have between 9 and 10,000 nurse practitioners, maybe not closer to 9. But it's growing rapidly, and the rest, of course, are the nurse anesthetists, and again, that's not the topic of the day, but they also are advanced practice nurses. They have a nursing base, they have a bachelor's degree in nursing, and they have a master's degree in nursing as their entry degree, as that is increasing. So just showing you that we are increasing with our applications. So we in the state of Georgia can be very proud of the number of new APRNs that we are producing. They are new APRNs, so they do need orientation, and they do need to get their feet on the ground, but we can, again, we feel comfortable that we have well-educated APRNs in this state. And here is the salary range I was talking about. Thought you might want to see those ranges just for your information. So as we bring in these advanced practice nurses, they're economic forces for the state as well. And they pay taxes and they buy houses and so on. We don't have the same multipliers and formula that dentistry and medicine have for nursing, but we've been working on that, and it'd be nice to be able to know what these kinds of salaries for 15,000 people really do to the state's economics. And you'll see that right now, this is the workforce projections for 2026, but the 2030 are about the same, that we're expecting shortages, or these are demands. These are expected demands. Registered nurses will continue to be falling short, as well as nurse practitioners. So it's in the top 20 of the workforce projections, and this is, again, the Georgia Department of Labor. Moving on to a little bit different topic, it does relate though. We have a very restrictive state practice environment, and you can see which states are restrictive. I will say that we really need a different color entirely for Georgia, because we are the most restricted state in the United States. And it goes back to the radiology issue. So we are very restrictive, and we will talk more about that later. Now this comes from Dare House's paper. You have it there. It's one of the best papers you'll ever see, I'll ever see, about the nurse practitioner research. People often say, we'll read one study and make a comment at these mics, and you have there, it's really a good summary. And Peter Beerhouse is, he is a nurse, but he is a health economist, and his team spans from Boston, from Harvard, to Montana, California, and then he runs a health policy center himself. And then, of course, the University of Pennsylvania, where they have the first health policy center that center on nursing. But we know, his points are, tens of millions of Americans lack adequate access. We know that. It's not realistic to rely on physician workforce. Look at the matches last year. I don't know how the matches went this year, but just look at it. Primary care nurse practitioners are more likely to practice in rural areas than physicians and PAs. And we're living in states with, those people living in states with restrictive NP laws have significantly less access. For one thing, they have fewer, and because they don't move here, because they know they can't practice fully here. And cost of care to the Medicare beneficiaries by NPs was significantly lower than primary care provided by physicians. All of this came from the Medicare database. This did not come from little studies here, there, and yonder. Peter Bearhouse must have spent 4 years working with the Medicare database to make sure that attribution is to NPs, attribution is to PAs, attribution is to MDs. But we all know that physicians are signing off on nurse practitioner practice and PA practice. And so it still masks what the contributions are. So there's no evidence that Medicare beneficiaries living in states that impose restrictions receive better quality care than others. So let's talk about evaluating very quickly. Let me just check my time. What is the value to the health system to supervise APRNs? What health care outcome do we get? What cost savings do we get? What is the value? I don't see it, and this is what I'm asking you to think about. Don't think about what you may, the prevailing thought, but really the MD loses scarce time to be reviewing those records and rarely finding anything, may find something to tweak, but rarely finding major change or danger. The physicians supervising APRNs have higher malpractice costs. The less access to care, 40% fewer NPs are in restricted states. Increased burden of transportation, people who can't get to the nearest, or to get, because the nurse practitioner's not out there. And we haven't been able to find any studies of quality improvement. There are some areas with some studies, with some areas that I wish that we had been just as good. It might be barely lower, barely higher, but I don't think I don't want to spend the time on that, because most of the time we think that the care is not duplicative because it's different. Nurse practitioner care is different, but still needing the outcomes. So Georgia's the only state to restrict ordering of imaging to life-threatening situations only. And we don't have any evidence of improving care. No, we don't have anything. It's duplicative because in the nurse who has a person with who needs the pain medication, we'll have to send them to a physician. There's no way else out of that. Only 5 states, according to the review that I checked on, are in the same restrictive mode. So the imaging and the Schedule II drugs are major barriers to us. I want to put this up to just show you that as we move toward doctoral education, you'll hear more about that. We have a different kind of team. You have even more educated. The master's prepared NPs are great, but as we move to the Dnp level and we double the clinical hours and we have increased the didactic hours by a third, they really are doctorally prepared professionals, and they will be the team leaders sometimes. They will have things to offer, because remember, they're expert nurses, and that has a lot to offer to the patient. And when we go beyond these, we go into subspecialties that are more aligned with medicine. So we have, after they finish this doctorate, then they go into a fellowship for nephrology, oncology, palliative care, and so on. So I think I'm going to stop here and let Blaine take over, and I'll be happy to take questions later.
Chairman Newton and Chairman Hufstetter, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to address you in the committee. I'm originally from Augusta. I've been a nurse. I was a graduate from the program here 30 years ago this year, and also as a nurse practitioner 17 years ago. Most of my background has been in the provision of clinical care as a nurse practitioner and also as a chief nurse for Wellstar Location Hospital, as well as a hospital in North Carolina. part of the Carolinas healthcare system, and so have been very involved either in the delivery of care or the oversight of care. I'm going to speak a little bit about the role and how it's moved in terms of the nurse practitioner role, a little bit of history, and then specifically the academic programs that we have here at Augusta University. The role is 54 years old. It was developed by Dr. Loretta Ford, who is a pediatric nurse practitioner, and she did that in concert with a physician, Dr. Henry Silver. And the role was specific to caring for children in an area that they were not getting the needed care. And so that was the origination of the nurse practitioner role. It has gone through several iterations in terms of the training required, from certificate programs to now graduate level education. And I'm going to speak to you about what we call the consensus model and how we've developed educational programs. We're in the process of, as Dean Mary mentioned, many programs are moving to the doctorate level. So it's a doctorate in nursing practice, and you can have one of the advanced practice roles as your area of specialty. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. There are more than 300 programs nationally that are now moving to the DNP role. Specifically for CRNAs, and that's not our major focus for today, but wanted you to know that the accrediting organizations and the certifying bodies for certified registered nurse anesthesia professionals have moved to the DNP level. So beginning in 2025, in order to sit for that certifying exam, you're going to have a doctorate level degree as a doctorate in nursing practice. And so other organizations are supporting that. When you look at the path to become an advanced practice nurse, I think what differentiates advanced practice nurses is that we have the foundational knowledge as a nurse first. And so there's the pre-licensure education that oftentimes we don't think about those clinical hours contributing to the overall knowledge of individuals providing care. So I'm going to speak a little bit about the number of hours that we provide in our program for that. And then you move to the graduate level education. Many programs are still at the master's level. Our program here, all of our advanced practice nurses are at the doctorate level. We still offer a postgraduate certificate to do a specialty in a different area, and I'll speak more about that in a minute. So these are the 4 roles that the consensus work resulted in. So there are 4 recognized advanced practice registered nursing roles. The certified nurse practitioner, the certified nurse midwife, the clinical nurse specialist, and the CRNA, the certified registered nurse anesthetist. So most of the comments that we have are centered around the nurse practitioner role. And so what that role brings is really advanced nursing. We don't talk a lot about that, but you have the foundation as a baccalaureate or pre-licensure prepared nurse, and you bring those experiences with you to your graduate level education to become an advanced practice nurse. We're involved in the treatment of patients, and so we do borrow from medicine in order to be able to do that, to evaluate and treat disease, both episodic, acute, chronic illnesses. There is national guidance specifically for MP programs, and I think this is of major importance. We have the American Association of Colleges of Nursing. They've developed what we call the Essentialist Documents. These documents provide for the information and provide the framework for how nursing education advanced practice level is developed. So their major focus is on safety and quality of care and the quality of nursing education. We also have another organization that's called NOF, affectionately, the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties. This is the only specialty organization that's dedicated to the development of nurse practitioner faculty. So their major focus is on core competencies to ensure that as we are producing advanced practice registered nurses, that we are imparting upon them certain core competencies that are required. And so we're going to speak a little bit more about that in a future slide. I've mentioned the consensus model. The National Council of State Boards of Nursing, their major focus is on public safety and ensuring that registered nurses, in this case, are providing quality of care and that they are appropriately licensed. So this consensus model was born out of this group. It's called the LACE model. I'm going to show you a diagram here shortly. But 48 organizations, nursing and nursing-related organizations, endorse this work. And this is really the model that we use to develop as a framework and use as a framework for our advanced practice nursing programs. So the LACE model is the consensus model. It covers 4 major areas. One is licensure. So in order to be an advanced practice nurse in practice, you have to have an appropriate license to do that. That is state-driven, and that provides you with the authority to practice. You also have to graduate from an accredited program. So there are major accreditors. I'll show you who they are shortly. And so the program that you graduate from must be an accredited program in order to be eligible for certification, which is the next step. So certification really is the recognition of an individual's knowledge and skills and experiences about whatever their role is that they're applying for certification for. And then the educational component, which is what we're majorly focused on. It's moving from the pre-licensure nursing foundation through graduate level education. So the LACE model is here. So the foundation that's not showing is the baccalaureate or pre-licensure prepared knowledge that informs the APRN work and decision making. So as you enter into a program, you're going to be deciding on the role. So one of those 4 roles that you see there, or an area of population focus. So an area of population focus includes pediatrics, adult gerontology, family, etc. In addition to that, it also has you making the selection of either a primary care environment or an acute care environment. And I'll list some of those for you. And then specialty, as Dean Marion mentioned, there are postgraduate fellowships that nurse practitioners and other advanced practice nurses can enroll in and be selected for to further focus on a subspecialty like oncology, palliative care, etc. So this consensus model said that in order to practice as an APRN, you must graduate from a graduate level program, and that program must be accredited. And the accrediting organizations that accredit those programs must be recognized by the Department of Education or the Council for Higher Education Accreditation. So here are the 4 major, there are more, but here are the 4 major accrediting bodies for nursing programs. At Augusta University, we have CCNE, the Commission on the Collegiate Nursing Education Accreditation, but there are others. ASIN, there's one specific to nurse anesthesia, and others. So this is really just a sample for you to view. So there's also part of accreditation for programs is something that's called the NTF criteria. And this is the National Task Force on APRN education. So both of the 2 major accrediting bodies, CCNE and ASIN, have elected to have NTF criteria as the basis for evaluation of advanced practice programs. So the message here is that there's multiple levels of accrediting, and so each of the accreditors are accredited. So we're leading to a safety mechanism here as we have these multiple layers of approval. So when you look at the criteria for quality nurse practitioner education, the really major focus here at the initiation of this work in 1997 was standardizing the criteria for advanced practice education. That was one of the major initial goals. This work has had several iterations. It's now 2016 is the most recent version, and Dean Marion mentioned that she will be leading this task force for the next iteration of this work. The work was funded in part by the Department of Health and Human Services and specifically HRSA, the Division of Nursing. Multiple organizations support the NTF criteria. This is, again, a sampling for you. There are more than 48 organizations now that support this work, and it's also supported by the National Council of State Boards of Nursing and HRSA as well. In addition to accreditation, we also have core competencies. These core competencies are competencies that are built into the advanced practice educational model. So these are, again, just a sampling. There are more. These were developed in part by the National Organization of Nurse Practitioner Faculties that I mentioned earlier. So these core competencies outline the content that should be covered in advanced practice programs, further leading to standardization and a high level of quality provided by these practitioners. Now, organizations, universities, and colleges can implement these in different ways, obviously. However, the core competencies in each of these areas are there. There are additional competencies for the Dnp level individual as well. Here are the programs that provide nurse practitioner education in Georgia. There are many in the Atlanta area, so they're kind of stacked there for you. But you can see there are programs really across the state that provide this level of education. Here at AU, College of Nursing, we have the baccalaureate degree and many versions of that, a traditional program and also the accelerated program. We offer a Master's of Science only for the clinical nurse leader, not for the advanced practice nurse. All of the advanced practice nurses from our institution are now at the doctorate level. We are looking also at a Dnp PhD combination degree for those that are interested in clinical specialties and also research. When you look at the program offering, so the baccalaureate degree, it is only for the nursing portion of this degree. It's 60 credit hours over 4 semesters, and that is nursing-specific content. In that experience, they have 765 hours of simulation and hands-on clinical experience. In addition to that, they have skills lab hours that are not included in that 765. The Dnp Level Programming, you can see the 4 specific areas that we have here for specialty: the family nurse practitioner, the pediatric primary care, the adult geriatric acute care, and psych mental health are the 4 that we offer here. Each of these have advanced level physical assessment that supports the physical assessment that they learned in their baccalaureate program. They have advanced pathophysiology and also advanced pharmacology. This is 77 additional academic credit hours, and in this they have more than 1,000, nearly 1,200 clinical learning hours that supports their education. And so I think I'm going to turn it now to Marion to wrap up with some conclusions.
So I think this is, I hope we've told you good news. We've got a lot of nurse practitioners coming. We do have a lot of standardization of our education. We're getting ready to go through a change, a kind of a sea change right now. Most of the organizations are saying, okay, now we have this DNP, we're raising the bar, we're going to have to change. AACN that does the essentials, NOF that does the NTF with AACN, and many other groups. So I think that we'll see even more standardization. I think it's going to move. It's already competency-based, but I think we can strengthen that part. And so I said that they are, but the point I want to make is the difference in medicine and PAs is APRNs are also experts in a nursing specialty. They don't just go to school to learn the delivery of the medical part. They learn higher level nursing, more family content, more community content, more population-based strategies, and so on. And so just wanted to remind you of that. We know that they are prepared for full practice authority. Our faculty do prepare our students to work in other places. They don't just go by the rules we have here. They have to teach them this content. They can't practice it that way, but they have to know all about it because they may leave our state. And so that's what we have done here and all throughout the state, no doubt about it. Plus, even our neighbor states sometimes have less restrictions, and they may want to go across the lines. Interprofessional teamwork, we're doing a tremendous amount of work there. We're funded for doing this kind of work in mental health and in relation to opioid management, the whole crisis management. So we believe that the interprofessional teamwork has very high value. We don't think that has anything to do with the signing off on records as we have in our regulations here. Interprofessional teamwork comes because you care and you know who knows the most about what. Physician supervision, APRN, brings a low return on investment in healthcare workforce. Restricting imaging in Schedule 2 is costly and delays needed care. We have no evidence that nurse practitioners use more. There's maybe here, there, and yonder we have other evidence that say they don't use more. So these are our conclusions of this presentation today, but we also have some recommendations. To simplify physician supervision, we would ask that we consider avoid any new restriction. Place all APRN licensure and regulation within the Board of Nursing. Remove the requirements specific for physician supervision, and written collaborative practice agreements. Allow ordering of all imaging and Schedule II drugs. This is a repeat of some that have already been brought to you from last time, but we reviewed everything, all the literature, and we believe that this is a rational and useful and high-value set of recommendations. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Does anyone have questions on the committee for either one of the presenters? I know one question I had, and I think I read it right, the DNP is at 1,150 clinical hours, is that what I read in the
Nationally, it's
Two slides.
1,000.
1,000 is the
It's
typical
about-
amount?
Is the required number of hours.
So a nurse practitioner moving here from another state that has a nurse practitioner or gets it online, do they have, they'll all have 1,000 hours, or is that just DNP programs?
The DNP is 1,000, the master's level is 500.
Okay, so
But I
those
can
are,
tell you it varies widely. There are many faculty long ago said you cannot teach family nurse practitioner practice without 750 hours. So it varies from program to program. You have to meet that minimum, but that's where we don't really have to go over 1,000, but we do anyway because we have a clinical project where we want them to change practice wherever they are, and because that's so important to implement. It's so important to implement new standards, new medications, new evidence-based guidelines, and those kinds of things. So they spend some time in their clinical setting making a change.
I know one more question I had was on, I guess recently I changed from an MSN to doctor of nursing practice. Is that recent or is that?
Well, we were
years
the
ago?
10th in the nation who started here in '05.
Okay.
But we've had them since '79. But in '01, when I got involved in the DNP movement, there were only 4 in the nation. Now we have 300. Well, over 300, and there's several evolving.
Now, what was the rationale for that? Now not have a master's level nurse practitioner degree?
Program here, or in general.
Well, here.
So when we were early starting the nurse practitioner program, and we had the vision that the nurse practitioner education would be best at the doctoral level. We needed extra clinical hours, we had extra content that we wanted to present to the student and prepare them for this change in society that clearly was coming. And so we made the decision as a faculty that we would start the DNP, but we would just layer it on the NP role. And then it wasn't streamlined. It was like the old diploma nurse coming back and taking all of that to get BSN. So we figured that integrating the content would get them in and out and onto the workforce faster and better. And so and our faculty decided it. It was certainly something that I wanted them to do. But they said this doesn't make sense to be having these 2 levels. Let's go ahead and put them together. And that's led a lot of people throughout the nation. University of Maryland's that way. Many universities made a decision. We're just not going to keep 2 levels here. We're going to go for the gold. We were afraid, of course, that we would lose students. We did not. And many of the students who were in the master's program switched over to the doctoral program. But we taught out that whole group that wanted to stay in the master's program.
Anyone else have a question? Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentations. We will go ahead and let's see. We might go on and take our break now, and then we will have a working lunch. Augusta University, NCG, and Children's Hospital have been gracious to provide some Chick-fil-A lunches. If we can get those and maybe sit back down in 5 to 8 minutes, we'll get started real quickly with the PA program, if that's okay with everyone. Thank you. All right, if I could get everybody's attention, this is a working lunch, so please feel free to continue eating and get up if you need to. Somebody needs a second Chick-fil-A. But we're going to go ahead and get started with our physician assistant presentation. Dr. Stallings, Department Chair for the Physician Assistant Program of the College of Allied Health here at Augusta University. Thank you for being here, and thank you for educating us.
Thank you for inviting me this afternoon. Again, my name is Dr. Judith Stallings. I'm Program Director and Chair at the Physician Assistant Department here at Augusta University. So I was given the task of talking about the prerequisites for the PA profession, a little bit about admissions and the courses, the training, and a little bit about post-graduation. So that's what I plan to do this afternoon. I will tell you a little bit about my background. I am a practicing physician assistant. I attended the former Augusta College, so that's a long time ago. So I was pre-med, and while I was at Augusta College, my advisor told me about PA. So at that time, I thought the only options for me was either being a doctor or being a nurse, and he told me about being a PA, and that was the best decision in my life. So I decided instead of continuing to be a doctor, to be a PA. So I applied to the program here. I'm a graduate of Augusta University. I never knew I would be here this long or would come back and be teaching, doing other things here at Augusta University, but it has been a blessing. So I feel like I have been trained here at Augusta University. I feel like our students are trained here. That's what we focus on. The physician assistant profession is modeled after the medical profession. It was started with the founder, Dr. Eugene Stead at Duke University, a physician who started with the first PA group. And so it started back in the 60s, and we've come a long way from the 60s. So there are several programs in the state of Georgia, but I want to focus on Augusta University. I'm going to go ahead and begin. Okay, so the goal of this presentation is to talk about the role of the PA and also the training and requirements for the physician assistant. I'm going to talk a little bit about the board certification, how that process works, the state's medical licensure as we go through the presentation. So what is a physician assistant? A physician assistant is a mid-level provider who takes care of medical concerns, and that's very broad as doctors see patients with different concerns. They perform, and we perform medical histories and also examine patients. We also order and interpret medical labs and perform special procedures in the office, in the operating room, and inpatient, outpatient services. We also write prescriptions and we assist in surgery in other medical areas as well. So within the state of Georgia, we have these 5 continuing accredited programs in the state of Georgia. So here at Augusta University, we have this program. Emory is in Atlanta. Mercer University and Morehouse is in Atlanta. That program is currently under provisional developing program, new programs established at Morehouse, and also South University. PCOM also has a satellite program here within the state of Georgia as well. So Augusta University was accredited in 1973, so that gives you a little history about the background. We have over 1,400 graduates since this program started in 73. So here are the faculty members. We have 11 faculty members, 10 of them alumni of this program. So we really take pride in our program, and it shows with our faculty. 7 of our faculty members are practicing clinically. And that's important for us as educators, that we practice ourselves in education, practice clinically to help us in educating our students. So in regards to the admission requirement, students or applicants have to have a bachelor's degree before entering in the program. We look at 2 GPAs. We look at an overall GPA and a math science GPA, which both has to be at least 3.0, a minimum of 3.0 to enter our program. The GRE minimum requirement is 290 for our master's degree program. We ask for 3 letters of recommendations, and we're asking for recommendations from physicians and also PAs. We're asking the letters of recommendation of people they've actually spent a lot of time with, not a day, not a month, but several months, maybe a year or more, to ask those individuals to write a letter of recommendation as they go through the interview process. We do look at direct patient care, and I would tell you that the composition of the student body has changed over the years. When we started in the mid-60s, the age range was probably mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Now the student body is closer to like 26. So it's changed. So we're seeing a lot of applicants who are graduating from undergraduate institutions applying to our program, so they haven't had a lot of experience, some time working in a healthcare area. but we ask them to do extra time volunteering in charities, find a physician, find a PA to spend some time to do some observation. We also ask them if they can acquire some type of certification in medical care, maybe a surgical tech, to be a CNA, to be a CMA. Also, some of our applicants are nurses or have been nurses before, so we see a variety of people. So that's the things that we're looking for direct patient care, that they've actually spent time with patients, not just, just stand in the background, but spend time doing certain procedures on patients. The shadowing experience, we have a minimum of 100 hours. Most of our applicants have 200 more hours shadowed. Again, this is observation where you're going following the physician or PA in the medical area. And then we look at volunteer experience. So as I said before, a lot of our students have been a certified nursing assistant or medical assistant for years in a dermatology practice or with an orthopedic practice. We're seeing this new trend now that applicants have been a medical scribe. So we're seeing that in our applicants as they apply to the program. Athletic trainers also apply to our program. As I said, nurses, surgical techs, and then we have students who may have a doctorate degree already. We do have applicants who have been a dietitian or have been has a PharmD degree before applying to our program. Our applicants are mainly Georgia residents, and we do kind of, because we're a state institution here, we do get some out-of-state students, but most of our candidates are from the state of Georgia. Our feeder institution, our Georgia Tech, we have a lot of applicants or students in our current class and previous classes who are graduates of Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia. Those are feeder schools for our program here, and also for Georgia Southern. We require at least 90 prerequisite hours, and these are some of the courses that we ask our applicants to have. They have to be strong science majors. Even when we recruit students and go out doing recruitment at high school and for some of their pre-colleges event, we stress that our students have to have a strong science background. So this again is based on the medical model here. They have to have anatomy, physiology, and be science major. Biology 1 and 2 is required. Microbiology is required. Organic, general chemistry 1 and 2, and all of these courses have to have a lab included. Now these are required, but we also have additional hours, 15 more semester hours that we ask them to get in these other sciences, and this list does include all of them, but biochemistry, genetics, molecular biology too. We ask for those additional credits in science to be strongly prepared for PA school here. So as you heard, the PA program is very fast-paced. Again, similar to the medical model, but our courses here are taught over 27 months. So it's not just 2 years, it's 27 months, an extra semester here at Augusta University. The first year, they're here on campus, so we don't have a distant program. They're here on campus at Augusta University, in the classroom, working with us, doing hands-on skills and training, even before we allow them to go to the clinical area. So then the first year, they're working in small group settings with small groups of probably 4 students every week to fine-tune on clinical skills. They also are in other courses to obtain the medical knowledge before going on to the clinical year. The second year is 12 months, that's the clinical phase, where the students are working side by side with physicians and also PAs who are experts. So during the second year, you see that I have here that it's supervised clinical experience. This is one of the mandates of our accrediting body, that our students are supervising and working beside physicians and PAs during this time. One of the new requirements too for our standards is really stressing to PA programs that preceptors can evaluate our students regarding their preparedness for clinical rotations. One of the things we also do is to work with our students too to make sure they have the medical knowledge and skills before they move on to clinical experiences too as well. With the physicians, they are able to assess our students to make sure they are capable, that they have the clinical thinking ability, the medical knowledge, and also the clinical skills as they move from one rotation to the next. So again, this slide here is just to repeat. Our students are supervised in the first year. working closely with the faculty, and also doing second years with preceptors working one-on-one. The first year of the PA program, I'm not going to go through all of these courses, just to give you some idea. The first semester, the students are in the Human Gross Anatomy Lab. They're working with human cadavers for about 9 weeks. The instructor for this course is awesome. It's very concentrated. Spend a lot of time in this course. This course, I don't like to always say this, but usually it helps us, it may break or the students as far as they're progressing through the program. We feel that the students have a lot of preparation before coming to PA school, and they're prepared in the sciences. They do well in this program. But anatomy is a course that really prepares our students and get them ready for the PA rigor. The first semester, they're not actually working as a practicing with us as a student to become a physician assistant. We have the basic sciences in the first semester. We have anatomy, physiology, preparing them before the second semester where we talk about and discuss the physical examination. So again, they're working, doing dissection on human cadavers. They have human physiology. During the first 4 semesters, they have 4 courses, 4 semester pharmacology. We have 3 semesters of clinical skills integration. Clinical skills integration, again, in a small group setting where we work with them one-on-one with practicing the physical examination the first semester. The second semester, we take them over to the hospital, assign them a patient, and do clinical skills and do observation there. And the third semester, they're again working in small groups, preparing them before they go out to the clinics. This other course here, physical assessment course, is a physical examination course that they have during the second semester. So again, as I said, the first semester is all the basic sciences. The second semester is where the students are now learning how to be a PA. So they're learning physical examination from head to toe in this course, and we split it up over the entire semester where weekly we work with the students to make sure they're trained and ready for preparation for the clinical year. These other courses include some of the clinical medicine courses. All these courses are taught, so they're in class Monday through Friday, most days from 8 to 5. And so they have a course on emergency medicine, orthopedics, dermatology, infectious disease. There are about 19 clinical medicine modules that they have during the first year. They receive a total of 122 credit hours over the 27 months they're here at Augusta University. The average GPA for our class is 3.6 of the applicants who are admitted to our program, and then again, this is an overall GPA. We also look at the math science GPA, and of our class that we accepted, they have a 3.5 GPA overall. Average GRE is 3.305. Average age, around 25 of this current class. Of each body, we've seen a trend of more females than males that accept in this current class, a class of 2020, 37 females, 8 are males. In-state, 42, 3 are out-of-state, and for some years we do have over 44 students if there's a student who had a delayed admission to the following year, so that's why you see these totals a little bit higher here. But each year we admit 44 students who go to train over these 27 months. Here is a description of our admission process and application. So I've given you the last 5 years stats. Again, looking at the class of 2017, we've had 423 applications, interviewed 143 applicants, and admitted 41. Again, some students transferred over to for the following year. Again, the class of 18, that 426, and you see just a slow tapering of the number of applications, and we believe this is due to the increased numbers of developing programs. There are over about 233 programs over, in that, maybe a little higher than that, in the nation. And so with these other developing programs, we feel this causes a little bit of lower numbers of total applications. But again, a high number of individuals we're interviewing each year. So as I said, the first semester, basic science. The second semester, we do the physical examination, where we're practicing with them from the head to the toe. Physician assistant students begin seeing patients during the second semester of the training. Students are taught to document medical findings and historical information in the second semester of their training. They get direct patient exposure in the medical rounds in the third semester of their training, so they have early exposure to patients during the first year. They also have direct observation of technical skills, medical diagnosis, application, assessment, and plans also during the first year of the training. And direct observation by clinical preceptors. Part of the PA profession emphasizes, and is a major part I should say, is clinical competency and medical knowledge. The standards require us to make sure our students are clinically competent, that their technical skills are appropriate for assessing patients and treating them. So failure of the physical examination course, which I mentioned in the second semester, where they cannot perform the physical examination, prevents them from going on in the program. This happens on a very rare occurrence, but students know that this is very important. They have to demonstrate to us they can do the physical examination. Each semester we have a comprehensive examination which tests them with their medical knowledge. If they don't pass this course at the end of the semester, they can't progress either until they remediate or can demonstrate they have acquired the medical knowledge. We also have policies too that if a student drops below 3.0 for their GPA, they're on probation. We have a high testing standard that any score below 75 is failing for examination. And failure of a course means possible dismissal from the program. So here we have 4 dedicated physical examination rooms that we can practice a physical examination. We have a surgical suite where we practice OR technique and suturing and other special techniques here at Augusta University. And we also use the Harrison building also for lab simulation to prepare our students before they go out to the clinical. Other courses we have BLS, ACLS, and again there are many more courses than I mentioned here in this presentation. And we also have a second opportunity for immersive medicine where they have another cadaver experience. So they have the cadaver experience in anatomy the first semester. Then before going out to clinics, they have another opportunity to do procedures and train on another cadaver. I'm not going to go through all of this. I did want to mention here about the dynamics of the physician and the medical professionals that we use for our guest lecturers. For the didactic portion and classroom experience, we invite physicians who are experts in their fields and also physician assistants to come train and teach our students in the first year, and then we look for experts also during the clinical year too for clinical placements. The volunteer opportunity for the students to get extra training is volunteer in these different clinics here in the CSRA on their free time, and many of our students do that. So again, the first phase is classrooms, didactic portion. The second phase is a clinical phase. Our standards requires to have at least a minimum of 7 required rotations. We have many more, but here are some of the required rotations they ask for us to have here. Adult medicine, which is, and I would say that our rotations are 4 weeks in length. We have adult medicine rotation, which is 8 weeks, so they have an opportunity for inpatient and outpatient care training here. Family medicine is required according to our standards. Behavior medicine, pediatric surgery, emergency medicine, OBGYN or women's health. And we have 1 elective, and these others are evidence-based medicine course and extra training that they can participate in during the second year. So coordination of clinical rotation takes a lot of patience and flexibility. Our students are trained over all the state of Georgia, mainly Georgia, and we do have some out-of-state rotations, but most of them are within the state of Georgia. Regarding the student life, again, classes are 8 to 5 most days, no weekend and night classes. And the students are expected to take courses during the summer, so there's just a week or two in between semesters. So they start in May of each year. We met a new group in May, and then they graduate about 2 years later in August. It's fast-paced. Even if a student is absent about 1 week, it really gets the student behind in the courses. Our courses sequential, and they're taught in a particular order. So if a student does not master the content in one semester, then they can't move on to the second semester unless they can prove to us they have mastered the information. I put this here just to also tell you how important it is for us that our students are in class and that they have opportunity to hear from the guest lecturers and also have simulation labs that we provide hands-on activities. So mandatory attendance is required, and also professional behavior and dress attire is required. And our creditors ask us to document that we can show that the students have appropriate professional attitude and behavior. Here in the CSRA, we use these institutions for clinical training. Again, this is just Augusta, and we have sites all over the state. After a student graduates, so they start in May of 1 year, for example, the students start in May of 2019, they'll graduate August of 2021. When they sit for their board exam, or before applying for the board exam, they have to show that they have graduated from an accredited program. The NCCPA is a National Commission of Certification Physician Assistants, and this is a national examination. Once they pass this exam, they're able to work in any clinical area. So the training here is training all the students to be able to work in any area, not to be a specialist, but to work in any area so our students can apply for any job in the area after graduation. They have to also apply for a Georgia license, and then each state has their own recommendations and application process. This also requires, through this process, that a PA, or a new graduate as a PA, has a record of who their supervising physician will be within the state of Georgia. So each state has their process. Upon certifying or passing the national board, a PA is certified to work nationally all over the country. But again, they have to apply for the state licensure too. National certifications every 10 years that you have to sit for your board exam. Here's a chart I was asked to show or talk about the board pass rate. Here for the class of 2018, first time pass rate was 97%, 100% in 17, 98 in 2016. So I provided that for you to see. After or before employment and during employment, students, PAs have to have hospital credential approval and processes. Forms come usually to me as program director, where I have to attest that students are able, or our graduates are able, to do the clinical procedures of the list of things which are provided on the form. And we can honestly say we have observed our students because of the structure and the training of our program. The career is flexible. Again, students and graduates can work in any area. They can work in general surgery for 2 years, apply to pediatrics and work there later, and then they can move from area to area if they want to. My first job here was in GY and oncology here at Oski University. I worked there 6 years. So there's a lot of procedures and medications, inpatient, outpatient clinic procedures and things like that. I did that for 6 years and then worked at family medicine here for several years. Now I currently work at Student Health Services. I can see the other students as patients but not the PA students. So I see the nursing students, dental students, medical students for their medical concerns here at Augusta University. So I just gave you that background about me just to show you that we can move from area to area or specialty to specialty if we want. If we look at the employment of our current graduates, they are seeking jobs in emergency medicine. Our students love EM. A lot of them are seeking opportunities also in surgery, sometimes specialized training in orthopedics or dermatology, we see a lot of students going into that, and then family medicine. Supervision, and I'm almost finished here. In order to practice clinically, a PA must be assigned to a physician, and the board will keep a record of the physician who you're supervised by here within the state of Georgia. A licensed PA is authorized to practice in public, private facilities, and to have a primary and, if needed, an alternate supervised physician as well. Physician assistants are not required to be in the presence of a physician when you practice and see patients to provide treatment and evaluation for either new or established patients. The licensed physician is just on your record for documentation. Of course, if you have a question, you always have someone you can call or talk with collaboratively about issues, but the physician does not have to see a patient after the PA, or to be in the office at that time, or to be actually in the patient's room as the PAs see patients. With the DEA, PAs apply for the DEA licensure for the state of Georgia. If you work in a state facility here at Augusta University, then the cost of the DEA registration is waived, and I believe it's about $300 or more. In the state of Georgia, we are allowed prescriptive authority to schedule 3 through 5 medications. Physicians and PAs work as a team. The accreditors stress that we also have to teach the students about interprofessional teams and practice, not only with physicians, but nurses and PTs, OTs, because we work as a team body. So there's a collaborative team approach for better patient outcome as we work together as a team. So that's a quick overview of PAs, what we do and what we do, especially here at the Augusta University. The structure that I gave you here is for Augusta University. It's not an outline or mandated structure for each PA program. There's some PA programs that are a little less than 27 months, some that may be a little more than 27 months. But we have those all of us have those required rotations that our students have to go through. And then we, Augusta University, just recently went through a site visit in March, and they made sure that we had documentations, and we did all these things that they require here, that I listed here this afternoon. So I wanted to open it up to questions about anything I may have discussed this afternoon.
I appreciate the presentation. I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
Real quick. You mentioned those different specialties. I know emergency medicine, family medicine, OB. There were several of them, behavioral health maybe. On those rotations, they do the 4 weeks. Is there a test after each one, or is it a summary test at?
Good question. There is examination, a test after each required rotation.
One of the key things we've seen about that is that in any rotation, you're not going to see everything that comes into that specialty in a 4-week period or an 8-week period. But if you do a testing, you can test on the things. So they're studying, in addition to doing their rotation, they're studying everything else in that specialty. And some of it will be stuff they won't be exposed to directly, but they will be tested on it at the end of the rotation.
They will be tested on it in a rotation. For example, if I would use the women's health rotation, it varies from rotation or place to place, but again, if they're required to do so many pap smears or do so many women's health consults, if they don't get a lot of exposure in women's health, there's overlap in family medicine. They're seeing female patients, they're seeing female patients in emergency medicine, so there's a lot of overlap as they go from rotation to rotation. But yes, that is one of the requirements. They have to pass that examination at the end of every required rotation.
And just one more question, and others may have. That one slide you just showed that said where the physician routinely sees patients or regularly sees patients, that was something we saw brought up in when we were researching other states and other advances, is with telemedicine, defining the location where a physician or a practitioner or a supervising physician or sponsoring physician routinely sees patients is getting tougher to narrow down. Is that something that you guys could look at or have looked at regarding a potential adjustments of state guidelines. I think it was just a couple of slides back.
Right, let me go back to that slide.
And that one would be an issue too, is the 2 at a time. If there's, I think the nurse practitioners are 4 at a time, if I'm not mistaken. There it is, the second thing, where the supervising physician regularly sees patients.
Right, a PA has to work in a practice that the physician has credentialing and also at that site. That's what that means.
Oh, okay.
That, right, for example, I work at student health, the physician also has to have credentialing process approval at that facility too, in order for me to practice in that location.
Did you have a comment?
Dr. Newton, yes. I was the one that brought it up to your presentation last time, and it's something that the board itself has wrestled with some.
The medical,
yes, the medical board in terms of what's regularly, and it's away, and it's more restrictive than the trend around the country now. So.
Anyone else have a question?
Just one question. We heard from nurse practitioners about the number of clinical hours that are required. Can you ballpark what that is for PAs during that 27-month program?
Well, they start, again, it's a 12-month, over 12 months, they rotate every 4 weeks through the various rotations. They have a minimum of at least 160 hours. So 40 hours times 4 weeks is a 4-week rotation, at least 160. Many of our applicants, many of our graduates or students acquire more than that, sometimes 200 hours or more, sometimes a little less.
15 of those months are the clinical rotations, is that right?
12 months is a clinical.
12, okay.
12. 15 months is a classroom session. And so all of the clinical rotation, 4 weeks in length, and based on about a 40-week workload or work effort. 40 hours per week.
That's,
times 4 is 160, but
it's 1,920. So that's those 12 months is 1,920 hours of clinical.
if you want to multiply that. There's one rotation, which is a teaching assistant rotation, where they're here on campus, so they're not actually with the patient during those 4 weeks. So of those 7, and there's 7 required rotations and leaves. There's electives too, which is 4 weeks, and adult medicine rotations 8 weeks. So they have to be a shadow or work with the physician at least 4 weeks, at least 160 hours in there.
For each of the rotations.
For each of those rotations.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for the work your students are doing. What was it, 1,400 all over the state of Georgia?
Great is more than that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. If we could, we'll move on along. Dr. David Hess, the Dean of the Medical College of Georgia at Oski University. Hess,
Yes, Dr. Doug Miller, the Vice Dean, is going to present.
all right, Dr. Miller, thank you for being here today. Thank you for taking some time out for us to educate us on the education program for clinicians.
So as we're getting our slides loaded up, ready to show, thank you for the opportunity, and Dr. Hess and I are pleased to present this data. We have handouts. If we have enough, if you don't, we'll make additional copies. So the Medical College of Georgia is the state's only public medical school. It's also the state's largest medical school. It's also the state's oldest medical school. And it's basically our privilege to prepare young doctors to be practicing in the state of Georgia. And we do that with the help of a lot of faculty from across the state. There's no question that we rely on the statewide campus of the Medical College of Georgia, which is distributed northeast, south, and west to accomplish our clinical education mission. Most of the preclinical education takes place on this campus and is part of the classrooms and small groups that we'll describe to you. We are, by design and by statute, I think, required to take 95% of our students from the state of Georgia. We get over 3,000 applicants every year, fill 230 spots with students from across the state and a few from out of the state. And at this point, we find ourselves with a competitive situation with other schools across the country, because now we're part of a network of MD facilities and DO facilities, and even competing in some ways with the Caribbean schools that need clinical training sites. So one point that I will make at the beginning of this, before we get into the details, will be that the only rate-limiting step to a medical education across the United States of America is clinical training slots. The ability to place students with physicians, and thank you, and the ability to give them a robust clinical experience, often in concert with colleagues from other health professions. And so if there's any challenge I want to leave you with, it's that ability to continue to provide our students from any health discipline with a robust clinical education requires physicians and other health professionals to supervise them very closely during their education. They then develop a degree of autonomy that allows them to practice more independently as time passes. So once again, this is our campus. George is our campus. 10 years ago, we began a plan to develop campuses for education across the state of Georgia. That continues to this day. We're about to open a new campus in the northwest part of the state in Dalton, in partnership with the Hamilton Health Center. But as you can see, we are a well-distributed educational platform and are proud of that, and have over 2,500 voluntary faculty and physicians working around the state in support of our educational mission. Getting into medical school requires undergraduate medical education. These are the prereqs for most of our students. You'll notice English is one of them. That's probably important because we want to take students that are good at math and sciences, and we obviously think that that's a good fit for what they need to do later in their careers, but we want them to be good communicators. We stress communications, and we actually have many students that can communicate in multiple languages and have the ability to do second language communication with patients in the clinical setting. Once again, I'm not going to go through these in detail, but these would be typical math and sciences that most of our students go through in their undergraduate degrees. We draw a large number of students, obviously, from within the state system, from public and private undergraduate universities across the state, and the representation, as you might guess, is a lot of students from UGA, a fair number of students from Emory, a fair number of students from Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern, and Mercer as well. So we see a lot of students from all across the state. So in our last class acceptance cycles, we've got the number of applicants that have submitted an official application. Class size has been steady at 230. Our acceptance rate's a little over 7% on average. The medical pre-qualifying test, the MCAT test, which is still used by most medical schools, our scores are in the 510 plus range, which is an excellent score. So that's an indicator of their strong rigor in terms of their ability to test in, and their GPAs average about 3.7, and their science GPAs are about the same, just a little bit lower than that. So medical school in the current MD program, which we are in the process of reviewing and redesigning in fundamental ways, begins with 2 years of foundational sciences, followed by 2 years of clinical sciences, and during that time there's also 4-year vertically integrated experiences that take place throughout all 4 years. And once again, the basic fundamental foundational sciences that physicians and most health professionals study, as you've seen in the previous presentations, involve those listed. Probably no surprise there. Anatomy is still gross anatomy, still involves dissection of cadavers, and is part of the early first-year experience. We have a 2-cycle first part of our curriculum. Year 1, we teach normal physiology, normal developmental biology, normal neuroscience, and then in year 2 we teach abnormal, and that's called a 2-cycle curriculum. In the new curriculum we're designing, we'll do a 1-cycle curriculum because that's the thought as to what the best way to handle that is going forward. Then in the clinical years we rotate our students through clerkships. We have 7 required clerkships that are listed there, as well as some required, not core clerkships in ambulatory medicine, emergency medicine, critical care. So over the course of their 3rd year in particular, they rotate through these clerkships with doctors in hospitals here at AU Medical Center, in the Children's Hospital, and all across the state at our campuses. We now send more than 20 students to each of our campuses for their 3rd year clerkship, where they will spend the entire 3rd year rotating in Phoebe Putney's health system, or St. Joseph Candler, or in other health systems across the state. They do come back to Augusta for intercessions, where they gather with all their colleagues and talk about public health topics or other things that are required ethical topics, but we do have them distributed for their clinical education. We have a unique point-of-care ultrasound curriculum where all of our students become essentially certified to do diagnostic point-of-care ultrasound. Matt Lyon and his team have worked very hard to bring that into all 4 years of the curriculum, and our students are using that in a distributed network now across the state, and they can feed those images back into our radiology and other expert ultrasound folks here at the medical center for teaching and interpretation. They then do licensing exams, and so when all of our students leave medical school, they've completed the 3 major licensing exams: USMLE Step 1, which is preclinical knowledge, Step 2, which is clinical knowledge, and Step 2, clinical skills, which is their ability to do blood pressures and listen to the heart and those sorts of things in a structured way. To complete our program, you must pass those exams, and in order to qualify for a residency license, you also have to be pass those exams. So USMLE scores are shown here for the last 8 or 9 years versus the national average. So we are blue, the national average is green, so we are running at a rate better than the national average. You can see the minimum pass rate is quite low, which is interesting, but nonetheless, our averages exceed the national averages and have for almost all of the last 8 or 9 years. In Step 2, clinical knowledge, once again, the minimum passing score is shown in orange, and you can see that we exceed the national average across almost all years except one in this test. So we believe we're giving students a strong preclinical and clinical education, and they're going into their clerkships and into their subsequent training with strong skills and knowledge. Clinical training involves 2 years of learning physical diagnosis, 1/2 day per week, 2 years of clinical clerkships, 40+ hours per week, supervised patient care experiences in hospital and in clinical settings, and then clinical skills assessment, which takes place through all 4 years, essentially, of medical school, and we assess that objectively with the so-called Objective Structured Clinical Exam, or Oski. So students must do a practical exam and demonstrate that they've developed clinical skills and clinical decision making as well. So it's a mixture of different types of clinical skill building. Our supervision policies and scope of practice are listed here. We all have requirements, all medical schools do, to supervise students in the care of patients in the clinical setting. So we require faculty members, who are often, as I said, clinicians or residents as teachers, to supervise the students when they're in the clinical setting. They do not perform independent activities as students, with the exception of taking some elements of the history, such as the social history and family history, which they can do and can report without the resident or attending being present. They are prepared for their roles as educators, both faculty and residents. They understand our educational objectives. They understand how they may differ from the educational objectives at Emory or Mercer when they're in the mix with other students, but we are very clear on that because the accrediting body makes sure that we teach to the educational objectives and that we accomplish those learning objectives as our main goal in the curriculum. And then medical activities that the students are expected to perform are all within the approved scope of practice for physicians, and that scope of practice is set by the licensing bodies and by the various national standards that define what a medical practice and scope of practice is. Certainly the need to seek assistance if they exceed their level of comfort or training is emphasized as part of their professionalism training. They learn other skills. I won't go through all these in detail, but the common skills required of a general physician are taught to all of our students. Simple things like reading a PPD, or more complicated things like ventilating a patient with an ambibag. But once again, these are performed under direct supervision of a healthcare provider who's licensed or a resident who is trained to be an educator, teacher in our program. The accrediting body, once again, encourages residents as teachers to participate in the care of, in the training of our students. So the growth of residency positions across the state over the last 7 or 8 years in the so-called GRADE program has added residents to the availability of teachers across the state. And once again, our capacity to teach our students also requires that we have adequate numbers of residents involved in their teaching. The Oski exam has different segments to it, as you might guess. When one has a clinical encounter with a patient, one has to be able to communicate effectively and have effective communication skills and communicate with other team members across all professions. So we stress that, and we require that in these testing segments. We have to have the students trained to take an accurate history, do an accurate physical exam, write up their findings, interface with the EMR as they need to, and then develop a treatment plan that may involve, once again, medical professionals and other health professionals in the care plan. National comparisons, just to give you a sense of this, each medical education program is unique. If you've seen one MD program, you've seen one MD program. So ours is unique in many ways compared to others, but they are all accredited by one body, the Liaison Committee for Medical Education, or the LCME. The LCME provides a certain amount of structured guidance through their standards and elements as to what you must do in a medical education program, but they allow for each medical education program to interpret those standards and elements, and as long as they are judged to be in compliance with those standards and elements, the LCME is happy. If the LCME finds a medical school anywhere in the country that is not in compliance with the standards or elements, they will identify that to the school. The school will be expected to correct it, and you have 2 years to correct a non-compliant standard per U.S. Department of Education rules and requirements or risk your certification. We also have to teach, through the LCME's guidance, general professional competencies appropriate for the next level of training. So by the time our students finish their MD degree, they are ready to go into their residency programs, and 98% of our students match successfully into residency programs across Georgia and around the country, and the ones that don't successfully match often match the next year round. So we have a very high rate of preparing students to enter the next stage of their training. That phase of training in residency can last from 3 years to 8 years for neurosurgery, so it can be quite long or quite short by comparison, but they are ready for that when they leave medical school. And we also, in our standards and elements of the LCME, are required to do interprofessional education as part of the curriculum, so we work across health professions and develop programs with our other health sciences colleagues so that our students, once again, appreciate the benefits of working with other health professionals in a variety of settings and understand our common responsibilities to patient care and safety. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Did good catching us up on time.
That's
but,
fine.
we have left a little time for some questions. Same question I asked on the PA program. Those for clinical rotations, I think you mentioned 40+ hours. Yeah, a lot hidden in that plus sometimes. But is it true they're also getting tested at the end of those rotations? So that maybe where the plus comes in.
Yes, the National Board of Medical Examiners requires that we do testing for each step of progress. So we use the NBME shelf exams, we call them, which are available to medical schools across the country to test their knowledge in obstetrics and gynecology or general surgery at the end of each rotation. In our Rome campus, they do all of those tests twice a year. They cluster them together, and the students do just fine. In the other rotations, we generally do them at the end of each 6 to 8 week rotation and just sequence them during the year. But no matter how we approach the testing, it's done throughout that clinical year, and it's done in a comprehensive way. And then the 40-hour work week is recommended. The students are generally not expected to be on call. They may stay later in the evening some nights, but then they pick up some relaxation time later in the week. So I would say the typical student probably is working a 45-hour work week in the clinical setting, bearing in mind that they need to go home and study in the evenings for these tests. So it's a combination of practical skills and learning at home that they basically put together to fully understand what it's like to do emergency medicine, for example.
And so that 40 hours a week, I think, on Kay's and Senator Kirkpatrick's question earlier, an estimate if you're 40 hours a week, I guess 2,080 hours a year times 2.
They're not, it's not 52 weeks, so it's more like 45, 46 weeks. They have some time when they're not on the clerkship rotations. The average clerkship is 6 or 8 weeks, and we do 7 required clerkships, so it adds up to be 45, 46 weeks of clerkship experience. And that'd be multiplied by 40, and you get to your pretty close to 2,000 hours. It's a robust.
2 years, 4,000 hours.
Yeah, 2 years, 4,000 hours.
Does anyone go practice after that? I mean, I know you mentioned 98% residency, and nobody does an internship in practices. Does a 1-year internship in practices? It's a minimum of 3 more years.
The minimum additional training is for primary care and family medicine, internal medicine, general peds.
So you don't think they're ready to go out and practice in Georgia after med school after this 4
No. And the licensing bodies require additional training and residency programming to allow for a full license. The licenses that students get when they move into residency are limited licenses that require supervision by attending physicians.
Senator Kirk.
Just a comment. Thank you for your presentation and a question. When I finished medical school, I was not halfway done training. So I did an additional 6 years before I went to practice, and that's partly to become board certified.
Sure.
You have to complete the additional training, which is, I'm not good at math, but it's a bunch more hours. And one of the things that we've learned, and we're not here to talk about workforce right now, but we know that where you do your residency is a more important factor in where you're going to practice than where you go to medical school. Would you agree with that?
Yes, very much so, yeah.
My question is on telemedicine. You didn't comment on that. You commented on ultrasound.
Yeah.
But telemedicine wasn't a thing when I was in medical school, and I just wondered how you're approaching that now with your medical students.
Well, in the education program, if you look at telemedicine as the practice of medicine at a distance, a patient being in point A and the provider being in point B at some distance away, we have students who are observing people who are doing telemedicine. The telestroke service, for example, that Dr. Hess set up years ago, that's been very functional, the REACH program. Our students, when they're rotating on neurology, they will have experience with that indirectly. They will not be caring for patients per se, but they'll be observing neurologists taking care of patients with acute strokes. Most of the educational implementation of what we could call telemedicine would be the ultrasound capabilities, which we've set up now connecting to Eisenhower, down to Albany, into Tifton, up to Rome. All of those connections provide high fidelity digital image transfer into our PACS system, and our students who acquire the images as the technicians, if you will, can then actually interface with the radiologist or the interpreter, and the interpreter can say, first of all, that is a technically solid image. That's an image that is diagnostic quality. And then secondly, they can say, and by the way, what do you think you see there? And if the student says, I see an abdominal aneurysm, which they have on some occasions, that can be confirmed, and the appropriate care plan can be executed in the Phoebe Putney Health System, wherever they may be. So that's their closest interaction to what I would call two types of telemedicine. One is actually like the stroke service, the other one's more like learning from telemedicine. Thank you.
Senator Hofstadter.
You mentioned, Rome, the testing is
Yes.
different. That's because the being taught all at once different than the other places.
Yep.
Do you guys have any, I remember when they started up there, because I work with those
Yep.
students up there.
Yes.
Do you have any data? Is it better, worse, the same, or?
It's equivalent. The LCME requires us to demonstrate, in fact, to them that any track or alternative approach we take to teaching, and the Rome program is called a track, improved track in our curriculum, that must be educationally equivalent. And so by the testing and evaluations that we do, it's been identical to what we achieve in Athens and Augusta and other places, which is interesting because it's a novel approach to education, which we call longitudinal integrated clinical clerkships. We're going to do more of that, we feel, in the future, because we believe that it sets up good practice patterns for following patients continuously throughout life and throughout an episode of care. So that model has been very popular in Rome, and we will expand that model up into Dalton this coming year, and then we will probably do it in other parts of the state, like Statesboro, in the near future.
So, like we asked the earlier one, the summary of those hours you mentioned, I guess the 3 years is the shortest residence.
Yes,
right?
yes, it is.
If you added the clinical hours or ballpark, I guess.
It's an 80-hour work week.
80-hour work week there, so
We'll just add them up. For 3 years of doing that, I guess that's residency, that's a gradually increasing
Sure.
responsibility.
That would be, gradually increasing responsibility based on competencies achieved towards an exam, which is a board exam that proves that you have the knowledge of a family medicine consultant, right? And so each of those years, maximum 80-hour work week, which we don't like to exceed. It's about a 3,500 per year, hours per year of work time. So, if a 40-hour work week is 2080, you're getting above 3,000 anyways. And so 3 times that, it's probably more than 10,000 hours of training in the hospital, in the clinic setting for that three-year residency program. So it's quite demanding, and the residents are, by design, allowed to work longer hours than the students in the hospital, that cannot exceed the 80-hour work week, and the rules for that are very, very, very stringent, and largely intended to do 2 things: keep the residents healthy and not allow them to make mistakes because of fatigue, because that has occurred in the past. That's a concern.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
I
much.
appreciate your time and presentations. We will move on pretty quickly for everyone. We did just see that a neighboring state of ours addressed, well, this year, South Carolina law. James, if we can get to a point where we're ready, since it just went into effect in August, just last month, and it was in response to some similar challenges. South Carolina is about half the size of Georgia, so everything is not commensurate, but they have rural areas, they have urban areas. They may not have a metro Atlanta area like we do as an economic engine, but a lot of Georgia is pretty similar. So we did see that since it went into effect, I think, August 19th. We had asked for a little bit of a summary. My understanding is it does mirror some of the changes that were made. This was largely in nurse practitioners, PAs this year, but I believe in 2018 they did some similar updates for nurse practitioners. So I think this is getting both sets of providers on a similar playing field and answering some of the questions. I think some of them we may have mentioned, like telehealth or rural practice, and how many of which type of advanced practice individual could be supervised. I think they addressed some of those. So we're going to see if somebody would go through it, and I think that's what we have. Thank you, James.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is James Beal. I'm with the Senate Research Office. Our office provides nonpartisan kind of objective services to all the Senate members. So I was asked to kind of go over S-132. That's what they call it in South Carolina. It's the PA Act of 2019. So members of the committee, I have on your desk or in front of you should be a memorandum that kind of looks like this. And I list out some of the changes that they made in South Carolina. And then on the second page, I added some Georgia framework in there. Just to kind of run through the list real quick. So what South Carolina decided to do, they previously had a geographic limit of 60 miles from where a PA could practice from the supervising physician. So they eliminated that completely. They brought parity, as you said, Chairman Newton. They added some language in 2018 to APRNs or nurse practitioners, so they brought some parity to that with PAs this year. So they have a 6 maximum ratio. They also cap the mid-level providers across the board, so a supervising physician can only be in agreements with 6 mid-level providers, PAs, APRNs, so on. They also eliminated a 6-month on-site practice requirement, and they eliminated off-site practice approval by the medical board. The exception is for a PA with less than 2 years of continuous practice. With an off-site PA, they had a 10% review requirement of charts and things like that the physician had to go through. They eliminated that. They basically put in a more broad requirement that the scope of practice guidelines will reflect some sort of monitoring method that ensures quality of care and patient safety. They allow a PA to begin supervised practice 10 days after submitting a scope of practice guidelines to their medical board instead of upon approval by the medical board. And they also added this requirement that if the medical board disapproves of the scope of practice guidelines, the medical board will suggest a remedy to see that go through. Their law also allows for specific PAs to carry out specific medical acts unless the scope of practice guidelines state otherwise. This includes they can certify a student as unable to attend school, refer a patient to physical therapy. They're allowed to pronounce death and certify the manner and cause of death and sign death certificates. They may also certify an individual as handicapped and execute do not resuscitate orders. They also allow PAs to delegate a limited task to unlicensed assisted personnel, like change dressings and things like that. Eliminates requirements that a patient be seen by a physician prior to prescribing oral doses of Schedule II narcotic substances. PA must consult supervising physician after a 5-day initial dose prescription. Prior to that change, they allowed for restricted Schedule II prescriptions. I believe that they could only prescribe up to a 72-hour dose, and this is now a 5-day dose. They require a supervising physician to approve an intravenous dosages of Schedule II narcotic substances beyond a one-time administration. That's within a 24-hour period. South Carolina also eliminated the requirement that a PA and supervising physician periodically review documents concerning the expanded prescriptive authority. My understanding of that is that they had a requirement. There's some documentation out there that they had to look over periodically. They eliminated that completely. Requires education in pharmaceutical therapeutics and 4 hours of continuing education in prescribing and monitoring controlled substances 2 through 5. We have, I think, 3 hours. PAs are required to have 3 hours continuing education if they have prescriptive authority for Schedules 3 through 5 or 4. Excuse me. A hospital or provider group credentialing committee is authorized to begin credentialing a PA. There's nothing in Georgia law that I could find that had something to do about credentialing committees. And the exam on the statute is called a jurisprudence exam. That was eliminated for PAs, and the requirement that medical board conduct in-person interviews is eliminated. And also, in the instance that a PA would change their supervisors or the supervisors would change for whatever reason, the fees associated with that are eliminated. So moving on, I added some points here about Georgia's framework. So neither Georgia nor South Carolina have geographic limitations. In Georgia, there is, as pointed out previously, a PA must practice where the supervising physician regularly sees patients. So now, the South Carolina law includes that line as well, and I also included with this memo the actual South Carolina law, and that language is on page 2 and page 10. So basically, they leave it kind of to the determination of the physician and PA, because they also provide for an off-site requirement, or excuse me, an off-site framework in South Carolina law. Georgia ratios, we've gone over this in the past. Maximum 4 PAs, 2 supervised at one time, and maximum 4 APRNs, 4 supervised at one time. There are some exceptions there. Alternate supervising physicians may be listed for any number of PAs, but are limited to supervise only 4 at one time in Georgia. Georgia does not designate or have separate requirements for off-site PAs, as I mentioned earlier. The only review requirement provided in Georgia statute is that a physician must review a PA's drug prescription orders and their corresponding charts every 30 days. The Georgia Composite Medical Board may grant a temporary permit to practice pending a PA applicant taking the test or the Composite Medical Board granting approval. And as I mentioned about South Carolina, they put something in there about requiring the medical board to provide a pathway to remedy any kind of disapproval. Georgia does not have that. Georgia law expressly prohibits PAs from signing death certificates and disability rating documents. There is some language in Georgia law that allows a PA to pronounce death. There's no express language concerning PA delegation of tasks to assisted personnel in practice. In practice, maybe someone can speak to this, but it may be that a physician can delegate the authority to a PA as a delegated task. Georgia has a blanket ban on Schedule 2, as we've described earlier. Georgia requires 3 hours in pharmaceutical education every 2 years for PAs with prescribing authority. And again, I've already kind of gone over this. No express language about credentialing PAs. Georgia doesn't require an in-person interview, and the Composite Medical Board charges $75 to change supervising physicians.
All right. That was just a summary just to look at someone who had looked at this issue fairly recently, or really in the last 2 years with both APRNs and with PAs. Someone may have a question? Or
I do. I'm looking at this, and probably I should know this, but I don't. Are you saying that it's separate limits for the PAs? Item number 2, the ratio there on page 2, are you saying that it's completely separate on PAs and NPs?
Yes, sir.
position, so they can supervise 2 PAs and simultaneously 4 MPs
Currently in Georgia.
in Georgia, and South Carolina is saying you can supervise 6 of whatever
Yes, sir.
at any one time. I mean, if we just changed the ratio for Perry and went from 2 to 4, then, and didn't take out the separate, then that would actually be 8. So I think that's something we have to be careful of when we do that. And then on the Schedule 2, you know, we may get some data on that. I know there's certainly been some strong differences of opinions on the prescribing authority. We're one of 5 states that's been pointed out that don't. I regularly hear from particularly my cardiothoracic surgeons that I spend 8 hours with sometimes in surgery about their PA's been with them so many years and why they used to make the rounds and prescribe this and now they can't, and when they get done at 11 o'clock at night they've got to do it instead of their PA. So I hear, you know, different opinions from different
That's even in the hospital.
physician groups. Yes. That they can't give them a prescription, you know, well, this is somebody that's going to be discharged, you know.
Of somebody they would discharge and they would hand them post-op.
Yeah, for so many days after surgery. Their PH used to do that when the federal government made it Schedule 2, and Georgia had that. So maybe there will be some additional data. I know there's laws to you that come out of South Carolina and see if there's an increase or not. Because some people would say, you got more people prescribing, you're going to have more prescriptions written, and I've got surgeons that say you're not going to have more prescriptions written. It's going to be the guy that works for me doing it instead of me. So, you know, we'll continue to look at that.
Yeah, just a couple of things. You know, we can argue about prescribing limits all day. We've been through that before, and I'm sure we're not done with that. But the death certificate thing is confusing to me because, you know, in our state, if there's any question about how somebody died, they're going to a medical examiner and they're having an autopsy, and a pathologist is going to determine the cause of death. So I'd like to know more about how they actually are handling that. And then on disability certification, there are some very specific rules for people, particularly if they're a workers' comp patient and they've been injured on the job. The workers' comp board has rules, not statutory, but regulations about that, and they currently don't allow anyone but the authorized treating physician, as defined in the statute, to sign off on a disability certification. So those are things we need to look into more.
Wait, are you saying that you think it could be broadened to include, or
No.
you think the way it is?
No, I'm just saying that it would require a lot of downstream changes in terms of the disability process, and the death certificate thing I got some concerns about, just process-wise, about how that works where the cause of death is not known.
All right. I don't know if there are any follow-up questions from anyone in the audience, or that I know we've covered a lot of ground on the educational background of multiple different valued healthcare providers. We've got a recent look. I know we've got a few things we can look at, and my understanding we'll have an upcoming meeting next is in Savannah. We'll have to get the exact date and location of that, but our plan is to once again another area outside the metro area with some of the unique needs of the rest of the state, with both for manpower, for workforce, and for us to be able to improve the health of Georgians. I think it was mentioned we're low on the number of nurse practitioners. I know what somebody mentioned we're 39th in the number of physicians. And so certainly looking at things that can make practice in Georgia both more attractive to others who may want to move here so that we can take care of the citizens is something we're looking at.
So 28.
So we got
October
28th is what we tentatively said, right?
Monday, October 28th will be our next meeting. I guess we'll get the location a little later. But thank everybody for being here, for coming to Augusta. I thank our hosts for being gracious and let us have a working lunch and get everyone who has to go back to Atlanta or other areas back before the traffic gets to Metro Atlanta in those areas. But thank you all for being here. Thank you for what you do for education. And yes, sir, Tom.
Can I make an offer and ask a question?
Yes.
My offer is that you had at the previous meeting said any data we wanted to submit, you'd be happy to entertain. If you can give us some idea in what areas you might want that, I can get plenty of data nationally or try to state.
We've got a good bit presented in the different presentations today on educational background and experience, but previously on other states. I think we addressed that at our first meeting fairly strongly.
Then my follow-up question would be, is it appropriate or would it be okay if we sort of submit some comments on some of the things that you've discussed? And to you?
That'd be fine. Certainly some clarifications, some comments, some updates, some comparisons, whatever.
Okay, thank you.
I think that could be helpful.
We appreciate the effort and your time you're putting in. And thank you.
We'll look for that. Well, with that, we look forward to seeing those who want to watch either online or coming to see us in Savannah on October 28th. And in the meantime, certainly submit anything that you'd like us to look at or take for consideration on the agenda. Thank you all.